Welcome to today's assembly in our Jesse Tree series. Today we're going to think about something really precious and special. Perhaps you could have a think about things that you have at your home that are really important to you. Perhaps you've got a favourite toy that you've had for a very long time. Perhaps it's something like a photograph of somebody that you don't see anymore. Perhaps it's something that somebody gave you. I'm sure all of us have got things that we like really a lot. And I wonder how we would feel if they got lost. Or worse still, if we had to give these precious things up. Is there anything that you would be willing to give up if somebody asked you to? It's a very difficult question, isn't it? And in today's story, we're going to hear how somebody had to give up something very precious to them. Here are some questions for you to think about. Have a look at these pictures and decide, would you rather give one of them up than the other one? Fizzy drinks or sweets? TikTok or YouTube? Playing sport or playing video games? Your bike or your scooter? Some new clothes or a day at the seaside? A family photo or a favourite teddy? It's really difficult, isn't it, to choose between things that we think are really important to us. Today we're in a wild, mountainous area, and the object in today's story is really not very good. The object for today's story is a knife. I wonder what it could be about. We've heard so far about Abraham and Sarah, and we've heard how they longed for a child, and that child was called Isaac. And so today we're going to hear more about Isaac's story. Abraham and Isaac, from Genesis chapter 22. Isaac was born to Abraham when he was very, very old. Abraham really loved his son and cared for him very deeply. One day, God wanted to test just how much Abraham trusted him, and so he said, "Take your son Isaac, the one you love, and offer him as a sacrifice in the land of Moriah." Now Abraham knew that God would not want him to hurt his son in any way. But could he trust God to provide another sacrifice? In those days, sacrifices were a way for people to show how much they loved and worshipped God. They would kill an animal and offer it to God. Abraham did not question what God had asked him to do. He simply obeyed. Early the next morning, Abraham woke Isaac and told him they were going on a journey. Abraham told Isaac they were going to worship God in the land of Moriah. They took with them some wood, 2 servants, some food for the journey, and a donkey, and they set off. It was a long way, and it took them 3 days to get there. When they were close to the mountain that God had chosen, Abraham said to the servants, "Wait here with the donkey. Isaac and I will go on to worship God, and then we'll come back to you." Abraham placed the wood on Isaac's back for him to carry. Abraham also took some fire in a pot and a knife before setting off uphill after Isaac. Isaac was puzzled. "Father," he said. "Yes, Isaac," Abraham replied. "We have fire and wood," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the offering?" Abraham answered, "God will provide the lamb for the burnt offering." The two of them went on together. They reached the top of the mountain God had chosen, and Abraham built an altar from stones. Abraham then laid the wood on the altar and then bound his son Isaac and put him on top of the wood. Surely Abraham would not hurt the son that he loved so much. Tears were streaming down Abraham's face, but he was still trusting God. He stretched out his hand to pick up the knife. Surely God would not allow him to sacrifice Isaac. After all, hadn't God promised him a son so he would be the father of a great nation? He lifted the knife and was ready to use it when suddenly the angel of the Lord called out, "Abraham! Abraham! Stop! Do not kill or harm your son." At that moment, Abraham saw a ram with its horns caught in a bush. Abraham quickly caught the ram and offered it as a sacrifice instead of Isaac. Abraham had trusted God even up to the last minute, and so God reminded him of the promise, "You will have as many descendants as there are stars in the sky or grains of sand on the beach." About 2,000 years after Abraham, God the Father gave his only son, Jesus, as a sacrifice for sins. Jesus, God's only precious son, was not spared at the last moment. He willingly offered himself to die in the place of people who were sinners. But we know that amazingly, Jesus rose again 3 days later. Here's our Jessie tree. You remember the first week we put on an apple to remember Adam and Eve. And then on week 2, we added the star for Abraham and the promise that God gave him. And this week, we're going to add on the knife to remind us of the story of Abraham and Isaac and how God didn't want Isaac to be killed, but Isaac was going to continue the important promise. Abraham thought he was going to lose his only son, his precious son that God had given him. But God really was just testing Abraham to see how much he loved and trusted him. And he knew that Abraham really did love him because he was willing to give up even his own precious son. But God loved Abraham and Isaac so much that he didn't want Isaac to die. And so Isaac became part of God's great big plan too. Many years later, God would be willing to give up his own son, Jesus. And we'll hear about that over the next few weeks.